you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and whitetail deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS-collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Spartan Forge. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 311. Today I'm joined by my good buddy, Aaron Hepler, to talk about coming back from a miss and filling two important tags. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. And for those of us that the season is still open, hope you're getting a little bit of timber time in. And as the rut winds down, this is actually one of my favorite weeks coming up. The week leading up to that Thanksgiving time frame. I was actually just looking at the forecast. I hopped on Spartan Forge real quick just to kind of look and see what things were kind of looking like for the weather forecast, and then also for movement prediction and stuff like that, because I'm probably not going to be able to get out till Thursday morning. I would think I'll have to be home, in the afternoon for dinner. We're not traveling this year for Thanksgiving, so I'm able to get out and do some hunting that morning. And then Friday, I was just kind of looking at the forecast, and it looks right now it looks a little dicey. Like there might be some rain in the forecast. And then I think I got my good buddy Aaron Hepler on with me today, but we actually didn't even talk about this. We were just texting about it today. I'm probably going to head over to his place around the opener of rifle season and do some bow hunting in and around some of the public land that he's familiar with around his house. I started pulling cameras or camera cards and stuff like that since I've been back to see if there's any potential targets, I guess you might say, that have shown up in the recent past outside of the cell cameras that I have that I've been watching, and I haven't had a deer that I was interested in chasing kind of pop up while I was gone, while I was in Kansas, and then I checked a couple cameras and still just nothing, man. So I'm actually kind of surprised. I was expecting there to be something that just kind of flashed and showed up that I might be able to try to make a play on here at some point in the next few weeks. But that still is not the case. So I'll attempt to still continue to go out and fill a freezer with a doe tag. But I think as far as trying to fill my buck tag, I think I'm actually going to head over to Aaron's because he still has some pretty good activity kind of happening over in his area, getting some daylight camera pictures and stuff like that. So we're going to do a little hunting together, maybe even film it if something happens. We'll see, but we're going to get in a tree together and hang out. If nothing else, it's always good spending time with Aaron and talking deer and hanging out in general. I did manage to get out this past weekend on Saturday afternoon. Sunday was a wash. I was planning to actually go out all day Sunday. But I had yet to even unpack from my Kansas trip. I had yet to kind of take the trailer apart and put everything away and stuff like that. So adulting caught up to me on Sunday, and I had some chores I needed to get done. But Saturday I only got out in the afternoon because we actually had promotion day at the jiu-jitsu gym, and that is where Coach Tim he gets everyone together from both the schools. He has two schools that are around here. and has basically a session where you get together and everyone kind of rolls live for about an hour, and there's a specific way he likes to do it. And for those who are getting new belts, it's brutal. For those of us that are getting stripes, it's just the usual brutalness of an open mat. And so, and truth be told, I've probably spent a little less time in the timber this fall than I have in past hunting seasons, because I've been kind of focusing a little bit more on jiu-jitsu this past fall, and spending as much time at the gym as I possibly could. So there were certainly days where I maybe gave up a morning hunt to catch an early Saturday class, or gave up an evening hunt because I wanted to go catch a class on an evening or an open mat or something like that. Still spent plenty of time in the woods this year, and it might be partially because there wasn't anything that I was really super interested in chasing, and so I was kind of spending my time maybe where it was most valuable, which was just me continuing to evolve and grow in the jiu-jitsu gym. And so the news there was I actually got a two-stripe promotion, which was, for some people, might not seem like a big deal. But for me, it was a big deal. It's grappling something I've loved since I was a kid and was away from it for a long time. And then, managed to find my way back in my, adult years now. And it's absolutely, next to hunting is probably my favorite thing to do outside of bow hunting. And so, big shout out and congratulations to everyone at the gym who got a new belt or a stripe. Those things are hard earned and not easy to come by. And so it was an awesome session. It was super cool, and stoked for Tim because he's got a great group of people in a great gym that we all get to enjoy around here. So with that, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into today's show. A couple things. First off, I mentioned it in the last podcast. I'm going to mention it again. My buddies over at Exodus, they always give me a heads up before anything happens. They're going to have their Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale coming up, and the only way you're going to be able to get on the list for this to get some killer savings is actually go to the website, ExodusOutdoorGear.com, and sign up for their mailing list. Just as a word to the wise, last year their sale closed out within a couple hours. I actually want to say it was just within around an hour. And so anything that they have on sale, and when this email goes out to all their members, everything's pretty much snapped up right away. So you're going to want to get on the email list or the newsletter, ExodusOutdoorGear.com, sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll be in the know whenever they drop those savings. This will actually be a site-wide savings, so pretty much everything that's on their site, which will include the MMT arrows, so their new arrows that they came out with this fall, and then their industry-leading Verizon 4G LTE camera and all their trail camera accessories. If you don't know about the Exodus Advantage, let me tell you these three things. They have a 5-year no BS warranty, a 5-year theft and damage coverage, and best-in-class customer service. Head over to their website, ExodusOutdoorGear.com, and sign up for the newsletter to get in some of the best savings of the year and actually support the folks that help keep this ship, as we know it, the Truth from the Stand podcast, running. Another thing to kind of send your way, this makes a great stocking stuffer. Almost got that backwards. And it's the folks over at Burpaw. This is actually, I don't know if anyone out there has ever used it. I picked one up because so the nice thing about the new hunting gear is that it is all super quiet. Usually that means there's some type of fabric that likes to pick stuff up along the way as you're kind of walking through the woods. My stuff's no different. My favorite pair of pants that I wear are the Sitka Stratus pants. They're super quiet, super warm. But man, after a couple hunts, depending on where I'm hunting, how thick it is, it comes home and it's covered in burrs. My Stratus vest, Stratus jacket, same thing, always covered in stuff. And then I spend time picking it off or whatever. It's just a pain in the ass. And it never all comes off. And so I ended up picking up a Burpaw. And this is actually a mitten that's basically designed to put on your hand and then be able to fast and effectively remove any of the stickers, burrs, from, your gear. If I take my dog out scouting or shed hunting with me, I can use it on him and it'll pull burrs and stuff out of his fur. You don't have to worry. It's not abrasive, so you don't have to worry about it ruining any of your gear. And it's one of those things that I actually keep it in my trailer when I went to Kansas and traveled, just so I could kind of clean anything off if I got into stuff while I was out on the road. So head over to their website. It's burpaw.com. That's BURRPAW.com. Use the promo code TS22 for 10% off of your purchase. It will make a great stocking stuffer, and I think it's pretty inexpensive to begin with. I think I paid like $25 for it, so with the discount, it's even less. So head to birdpaw.com and check that out. One last thing to drop is just if you're not using Spartan Forge, you're going to want to check those guys out, spartanforge.ai, or you can download the app at any of your iOS or Android app stores. But the big thing is now is that they just actually released recently the desktop app. And so I have had a chance to play around with that, and that thing is ridiculous as far as like 3D. And they actually launched the 3D component on the app as well. And so that just kind of is a next level feature. That north piece I've been scouting and stuff like that. There's certain things that you just don't see on a regular kind of flat map unless you're kind of walking it. And so I've actually been able to kind of go in and look and see some just nuances in the terrain that I wasn't aware of before that I need to go back and kind of explore. And so it's been super cool to play around with that. So be sure to check that out. SpartanForge.ai is the site. And then Android and iOS stores to pick up the app. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. I have my buddy Aaron Hepler on. Aaron is just one of those dudes that is probably one of the most dedicated hunters that I know, and scouts probably as much, if not more, than anybody I know. Summer, doesn't matter what time of year it is. The dude is always in the woods. His wife is in the woods with him. His daughter's in the woods with him. Like, he just basically lives in the woods. And he had a pretty epic year this year. He had 2 tags that he really wanted to fill. One being a Colorado elk tag. And I'll let him kind of tell that story. And then, of course, his Pennsylvania whitetail tag. And the thing with the PA season, Aaron always has a great crop of bucks. He just does an incredible amount of work and really knows the public land that he hunts like the back of his hand. And there was a really good deer that he was hunting this year, and things don't always break our way, and you sometimes have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and come back and have some mental toughness. And Aaron kind of had that type of season this year, and I'll let him tell that part of the story. And then in the back half of this show, we kind of talk through my Kansas trip, and I kind of give everyone the download on what happened in Kansas. So with that, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, I want to tell you happy Thanksgiving. Have a happy and safe holiday, and we will see you on the other side of that. Thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And I have my good buddy on. You know him, you love him, Mr. Aaron, by God, Hepler. What's going on, man?
Not much, buddy. How are you?
I'm good, man. How you been? You been doing all right?
Yeah, man, I'm great.
That's good, man. We haven't. When's the last time we've seen each other, like actually face to face?
I think April.
Is that it?
I think it was when we were in May. When we were turkey hunting.
Yeah.
Or did we do a summer? Did we go out there in the summer?
I went solo, I think, because our schedules just never synced up. Like Tom and
we did. We went separate.
Yeah, we went at separate. We went at separate times.
Yeah, we didn't get our normal summer pull in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we literally haven't seen each other face to face since April, beginning of May. Right? Is that it?
Yeah. We went for the opener of the turkey season together there.
Yeah. That's way too long, man. Because usually you and I do these in person, but schedule's just not syncing up this time. But we need to make sure we get a hang together, dude. Because that's way too long for us to not to have a hang.
Absolutely, I fully agree.
We might need to go up and console Tom.
Yeah, he's I think he's ready to. He might be on the list, on the watch list.
I know, man. I know. Tom, we love you, man. I know you're probably gonna listen to this. We love you. But yeah.
Hey, he's hunting just as hard, if not harder, than everybody else that I know that hunts.
Dude, that dude is getting after it. Like I mean, look, I love me some hunting. Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But like the amount of hours he's logging in a tree right now, and and he's hunting a spot, just for everyone out there listening, like Tom hunts the north piece that we've scouted together and stuff. And there's just not a lot of deer there. I mean, I won't say there's not a lot of deer there. I think that's a misrepresentation of the area. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, they're just spread out.
Yeah. So it's like, if you're in the game, like you're in good shape. But if you're not, like, you're way not. You know what I mean?
I think the biggest issue is that the cover is not. There's areas that have there's spots there that have really great cover, but there's, you could walk a mile between those two spots. So those deer are wasting no time getting from that spot to that spot.
Yeah, yeah. And so he's just been pounding the hours and, just logging seat time all day sits,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and and deer have been scarce. It's just one of those seasons where it feels like, every time, at least in talking to him, because I did talk to him, I think on my way back from Kansas, like he and I had a chat, because of course I had like 24 hours of time worth of time to kill.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I hit him up and we were just kind of talking. Just also, I just wanted to see what he was seeing and what was going on, because I've been kind of out of the loop since I was gone. And he just, not seeing a lot of deer just in general,
Right.
And it almost feels like it's one of those seasons where I should totally have him on. We should talk about it at some point, or maybe the three of us have a get together and just catch up. But
That'd be a
like,
great idea.
like anytime he makes a move, it almost feels like he moved away from where the deer were going to get. You know what I mean? Like you just start second guessing yourself. Like, am I actually at the right spot? Do I keep missing by like
Right.
a day? Or because
Well, and he keeps getting daylight pictures of all
yeah,
these ones we've been chasing, and it's like he's obviously
in and
around them
around the right
somewhere.
area. It's just
Yeah.
like, and I think, he and I talked about it a little bit, and we can talk about this offline because I don't want to give away like the secrets as to where some of the stuff might be. But
Yeah.
the area where he's getting those daylight pictures, and the place where we had that camera that we failed to check early in the season, until I got up
Right.
there at one point.
Right.
I think we need to kind of go out that whole side, because I think that's the money spot, is out that
Mm-hmm.
out that direction. Just
Oh yeah, I
continuing
agree.
out.
It's a perfect funnel there.
Yeah, yeah. So he and I were talking about that a little bit, and because he went to the complete top of that thing, which was insane. I was like, man, I don't know that I would have
Yeah.
made that hike, because that's a brutal hike.
Yep.
Yep. But so, dude, I want to catch up with you a little bit. We've talked here and there, but not. We haven't done a podcast since, and we've had a couple. I mean, you and I talk pretty frequently, just in general, like via text and phone calls and stuff like that. But you've had a pretty rock solid season. You had some ups and downs, but I would say by and large you had more ups than you did downs so far.
I have had more ups than I've had downs. It's been a really great year. Actually, this is my best year. This my goal was to fill two very important tags, and I freaking did it. So I'm stoked.
So I want to talk about the first one first. Like, so you went to Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had bugles on your mind, so much to the point that we were shot gobbling turkeys with bugle calls. Like,
hey, it worked.
it did work. The not so pro tip: take your bugle turkey hunting with you. It works like a charm.
Oh man, next year we're
not even gonna bother with turkey calls, dude. We're just gonna walk around the woods just bugling, just doing it.
It was
up.
fun.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Yeah, it worked. I mean, I'm not gonna look. I'm not gonna deny it. I mean, you ripped the bugle and we got some shot gobbles. So
yeah.
Hey,
especially that one day that one morning we were hanging cameras together, and there were like 7 going nuts.
Oh, dude, it was crazy. Yeah, that was the thing. Like that. I mean, that's what got me all jazzed for that. Like for that hunt was that we had
turkeys everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And then
we got the secret weapon.
Yeah, and then we couldn't buy a freaking gobble. Like after that, it's like I would have paid someone just to even go into the woods and like pretend at that point.
Well, we got gobbles just on Sunday.
Yeah, just on that last day. But
when you couldn't hunt.
Yeah, exactly. So we won't get into that, at least on this episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you had bugles on your mind, and you were headed to Colorado shortly after. Yep. I think you left about the time I got back from Idaho, right?
Yeah, I went I think I went we left the 22nd of September, so it was like right when you were getting back.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, man. Like, so what was the setup there? Like, where were you headed? What was the deal?
So as far as elk hunting goes, kind of been planning this trip for like 2.5 years. Put some points in. We found a drop camp outfitter that did public land hunts. So honestly, for a first elk hunt, it's a really awesome way to go. They kind of had some pre-scouting done, and I mean they set up camps in these areas like every year.
Right.
And fortunately, we found out that they rotate their camps, but they actually do fully guided hunts from the camp that we were in.
Mm-hmm.
So the deal is it's public land. We split the cost between 4 people. They take you in on horses into the back country and set you up in a wall tent that they have like all the camping supplies there, minus your sleeping bag and stuff like that.
Right.
So it was kind of like glamour camping, for as far as public land elk hunting goes. But
Right.
they drop you off on the horses and say, "All right, Texas when you get one." And it was such a great hunt, man. The weather was awesome the entire week, and that first night we hunted just a little bit, check the mountain out a little, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of thought like, oh, tomorrow morning we're gonna kind of slip in down this way and that kind of thing. So there were, like I said, there were 4 of us, so we paired up, and my partner and I, we kind of just we were working out a ridge in the morning, and we decided to just get up and glass and listen. But as soon as we got onto this glassing point, there were bugles everywhere. So we got in between a couple of them and ended up. Well, we got in, headed down to the first one we heard, which must have been a herd bull, because he would come up close and then go back down to where he originated.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was just trying to round his cows down so they
Oh,
wouldn't
okay.
come up to me.
Yeah.
And then what was happening is these satellite bulls, when he would back off, they would start coming down. And then when there was more racket, he would come up to round his cows down, and then the satellite bulls would go back up the hill. So we were kind of like stuck in between them there,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of seesawing back and forth. So we just kind of just kept working out these draws, uh, you know, went from draw to draw on this mountainside, and found like a nice little meadow with a wallow in it and stuff. Looked like it hadn't been used at least that day. It was frozen, a little ice on the top of it.
Right.
And I ripped a bugle there and got like a little snot answer, but it was close.
Right. I
Like,
thought you were going to say you ripped a bugle there, and all of a sudden a turkey gobbled. That would have been even.
yeah, bear roared.
And that's when I knew that it was about to go down.
Yeah. So so we looked on Onyx and we could see like this little uh opening that would be a good place to set up. And I was like, oh no, it kind of sounded like he was in that already. It was only maybe 100 yards away from where we were.
Mhm.
And he's like, I think he's further than you think. I'm like, I don't know. He sounds pretty close. So what we were gonna do is I was setting him up so I would be the caller and have the bull. The thermals were already pulling uphill, so I was going to try to call from below and have the bull try to catch my thermals and have him get the shot.
Right.
So I set up probably maybe 60 or 75 yards down below him on this hill, and put my pack down, knocked an arrow, and I bugled, and the thing bugled so loud, like it was my eardrums were going to burst. It was so loud.
Yeah.
And as soon as he bugled, I looked up, and this opening was only maybe 80 yards wide,
Mm-hmm.
and I can see him on the other side of the woods running towards me, and they're coming straight at me. And it's the bull that I shot, and another. There was a smaller 6x6, and they're running across this opening, and they get to 50 yards and stop, and like, oh, something's not quite right. But then he got like, all that stiff-legged walk, and he's like walking straight towards me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, he's all fired up, so I'm going to have to take a frontal shot. But then he kind of turned just a little bit. Still would be a frontal shot, but like he's kind of angling down the hill a little bit. And I picked a spot that I'm gonna say, oh, that's gonna be 30. And drew my bow when he went behind a tree, came out from behind the tree. I settled the pin and made the shot. And the bull just dropped over like a pile of bricks.
Are you
So what
serious?
happened? Yeah, what happened was is I hit his I guess his bottom rib on the side of it, and it went up into his spine, like behind his shoulder blade. So I got like probably 18 or 20 inches of penetration.
Oh wow.
And he's like moving his head all over the place, and I had to make some more shots on him. Um, probably would have only had to make one other one, but you know,
Right.
when you're in that moment, you just want to get it over. So
Right. You're just like, stop moving. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
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 So we're all jacked, and my buddy's coming running down the hill, and he's like, "Holy shit! I can't believe it! I can't believe it!" And this was my first elk hunt ever, and this was the first morning I've ever gotten to hear bugles. Or I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. Like I've made 10 bugles today. I killed
Right.
enough, And um, I get up to this elk, and I'm like, I'm just, you've seen the pictures. I'm just
Yeah.
like floored, like because at that point, when he was coming across that thing, I was in go mode. I had no adrenaline dump at that point in time because I was just there was no time to have it.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay, now I got to focus on the shot, and that's all you think about. Once that bull, I knew he was legal. Like you saw they have to have a brow tine and a main beam or whatever, and I'm like, well, he's got that. I know that. So
Right.
stop looking at that, and you're just ready to make a shot. So I get up to this bull, and you can see it in the pictures. My face is just like, I can't believe this just like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like I'm shaking like a leaf, like just out of my mind. And my buddies will probably make fun of me for telling you this, but I kind of mentioned this to you before. We take all the pictures, and I take out my license to fill out my tag, and I was wearing sunglasses because my eyes had been my right eye had been bugging me a little bit. Just it's there's no humidity there or anything.
Right.
It's so dry. And it was watering like crazy or whatever, and I didn't remember getting anything in it or whatever, and I like look down at my tag, and my sunglasses are all foggy. I'm like, oh, that's not right. So I like put my sunglasses up, I look down at my tag, and it's all foggy, and I'm like, so I look at the doc I look at him with my left eye, clear as a whistle. Look at him on my right eye, I can see like the outline of a person standing there, but I couldn't see it. He's 5 feet from me. I couldn't see his face or
Jeez.
anything. So he ended up looking in my eye later, and just it looked like I must have had a sty or something and scratched my cornea.
Right.
But you know, I I I I can't imagine I went from being able to see to not being able to see in the time it took me to shoot the elk. So I probably couldn't see him very well when I shot him.
Right.
So I was just like very thankful that it went the way it did.
Right.
Um, with that, but I'll tell you what, man, it's such an experience. Like the first, we hunted 11,000 feet. I shot the bull at I think 10,500,
Mm-hmm.
and like rolling around in your sleeping bag is hard.
Yeah.
Like the first couple nights, you like roll over onto your right side from your back or something, and you're like huffing and puffing. So like quartering this bull with not really being able to see and not being able to breathe. It's just it's humbling,
Yeah.
but it's so cool,
How was
so worth it.
how yeah, I was just gonna ask, how was the dealing with the elevation? Because I've hunted it in the past at like place we were at in Montana was like base camp was like 8,500 feet, I think, and then we hunted up to like probably like right around 10,000,
Yeah,
roughly, maybe just a little over 10 if I'm remembering correctly. I have to look back on my map. There was one peak that was like the highest like point that we went to on that trip. I'd have to
yeah,
look back at that peak on the map just to see how high it was, but I don't want to say it was like 10 something.
yeah.
How was dealing with the elevation just in general?
It was wild, man. Like the first, so we drove. Well, one guy flew, and then three of us drove 24 hours straight, so we could try our best to get a couple days in
Acclimate,
before we
yeah,
were, yeah. Which probably hindsight, you probably need a lot more time than that, but you can only take so many days off.
yeah,
So we drove into Fort Collins, and we stayed the night there. So that's like 5,000 feet.
hmm
And then the next morning we drove to the trailhead, which is 10,500. And you like significantly notice the difference. Like
Yeah.
5,000, you're like, oh, I don't feel any different.
Right.
But dude, when you're at, we're like, we were all excited to get to the trailhead. So we're like, oh, let's just, we're going to camp. We were camping at the trailhead that night to wait for the guide to pick us up the next morning. We brought like pop up tents or whatever.
Right.
And we decided, oh, let's just walk up that hill over there. Like, just for fun.
Right.
It was hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like just that, like we should have just sat our asses down and just, you know,
Yeah.
did nothing, but we didn't really do that much, but it's like it was wild, man. Like I said, all of us complained about rolling over in our sleeping bag, because you could get tangled in that thing, you struggle to get it, but
Yeah.
it was wild. So our camp while we were hunting was at 11,000 feet, and some of the hunting that we did, like some of the glassing and stuff that you do, is higher than that. Like you can get up to there was one peak close to us that was a little over 12.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember going all the way to the top of that, but we did hunt above our camp a couple times, to glass and to listen in the mornings and stuff and evenings.
Right.
Um, and it's beautiful. It's all worth it. But when you get down into the 9,000 from 11, you're like, oh my goodness, I can breathe. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's the elevation is no joke. Like when like the Montana trip, we drove out, which I think was one thing that helped us just
yeah,
in general. Cause we just drove straight to where we were going. So it
yeah,
wasn't like we stayed like you did was smart, like just to kind of give yourself a chance to kind of acclimate a little bit.
right.
We didn't really do that, but you know, it ended up working out. Nobody had like any type of um, mountain sickness or anything like that. Everyone was pretty good. The only time I've ever experienced that was I actually went to Colorado snowboarding one year,
Okay.
and that was when I was living in Orlando. So I was going from like sea level,
Right.
flew into Denver, and then drove to Winter Park, Colorado. I think it's what it was called. Um, and then went snowboarding, and like the one mountain was called Mary Jane, I think. And I want to say the peak was like, for some reason, 13,000 feet sticks in my head. It was the tallest point of like that particular like ski
Okay.
mountain. And I was okay. But I had also read before I went, like, like you shouldn't smoke, like to avoid like sickness, like don't smoke, don't drink, like don't dehydrate, like all this stuff. So I
Yeah.
was cognizant of that toward like me and my buddy went, and it's like I didn't drink any beers, like or anything like that. And my buddy was like, "Woohoo, let's drink some beers," like,
Horrible idea.
and like he's like the next day he's up like throwing up, like super
Oh
sick. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like and I was fine. I mean, I had a little bit of a headache like the one day, but that was about the extent of it. But he actually got like legit like mountain sickness for like a day. Like
Yeah.
he probably should have went to the doctor to be quite honest with you, but he just laid in
Yeah.
the
That's
hotel
that
room that day.
that stuff's no joke. I mean, so I took Diamox before I went,
Mm-hmm.
and so did the one guy I was with is a pulmonologist that I've worked with for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the other two guys one's a physician's assistant and a nurse practitioner. So we all were taking Diamox. To the PA and NP both took it like the day that we got into Fort Collins. I had been taking it for a couple days,
Mm-hmm.
and so was the doc was taking it as well, just to help acclimate. And everybody tells you to take a little ibuprofen because apparently that helps with the general swelling and symptoms from altitude sickness.
Right.
But the doc was pretty extreme. He was using an oxygen deconcentrator at home with like a nighttime mask to make his oxygen levels drop into the
Jeez.
80s.
Good Lord.
Yeah,
That's a little.
he
It's
he he thinks it worked. So I don't
whatever. It's like the placebo effect. Like he
know.
did something, so he thinks it works. Good for him.
Yeah, yeah,
It's funny. Like the scientists, like with the anecdotal evidence.
yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I
And I
mean?
mean, like as far as the mechanism and stuff, like he's pulmonologist, so he like knows what's going on with all this stuff. So it's crazy to
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Get
mean,
all
if you're
the
gonna
little
believe
tricks.
someone who says like, yeah, I used this thing and it worked, it's like he would understand why it would work, you know.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, and then you've got like me and my knucklehead buddies. We're just like, yeah, let's just go in and rip it, dude. Like,
I think part of it too is probably a little on the mental side. Like
mm-hmm.
before I researched elk, I never really even knew about altitude sickness. And then
Mm-hmm.
you're like reading about elk, and you're like, oh, elevation. Oh, you got to acclimate, and you're like, really? And then you read more about that, and you're like, yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, it's weird because it affects different people differently. You know,
Yeah.
it's like some people, like I said, like I went and I was fine. Like I had no, and none of the guys I went with like had an issue with it either. Like everyone was good. I did some pretty crazy like training prior to that trip though, like
Yeah.
overkill. Like you don't need to do what I do or what I did to go elk hunting by far, but I was
Right.
doing like marathon sprint training with like 40-pound weighted vests and
Oh,
stuff
I
like that.
remember you telling me about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was ridiculous.
I did a lot of kettlebell, like a lot of kettlebell stuff for about 8 weeks before I went,
Mhm.
and I think that helped a lot. I honestly like I didn't have any other symptoms other than like being a little more short of breath when I would walk than I would normally would be when I was walking uphill and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and if you're in
And
pretty good
after
shape, like it resolves pretty quickly. Because like I noticed, like when
exactly,
I got there, like I mean, because I could tell a difference, like just the elevation being different. You know what I mean? Like it was like okay, it's
yeah,
like I'm a little shorter of breath than usual. Like I wasn't like oh man, this is terrible. It was just like okay, I'm noticing like I don't have as much ability to take in as much air as I usually do, and it was
right,
probably like 2 days of that, and
exactly.
then it was like and then I was fine.
Yeah, I think we all were saying about 2 or 3 days. We felt like we could tackle it better than we were able to in the beginning. So
Right. So how many of you guys ended up, so you killed that bull. Oh, well, let me back up for a second. So you killed that bull and you're kind of like bewildered, like, can't believe it just happened. Right. Like what was going through your mind is like, like, as you realize, like it set in, like, I just killed my first bull elk.
it's just it's a real surreal feeling, man. Like you get to that you get that idea where Western hunters like kind of poo-poo whitetails a little bit, like
Mm-hmm.
you're like, man, I never want to hunt another thing again. Like you're,
Right.
you're so like jazzed. I mean, it's such a big animal.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember picking up a quarter and being like, this thing is as big as a deer. Like
Right.
like one quarter is as big as a deer.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my goodness. And like just everything about them is so big, and they're beautiful animals. But then like I was able to like drag that thing a little bit, little, I don't know. I drug it like a couple yards to get it off a log so we could start quartering it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no picking any of that animal up.
No.
Like you could drag it because it was, like loose dirt there, but like there's no way. Like it's huge.
Yeah.
But
The thing that always gets me too is just like, you know, especially whenever I was in Idaho, was just you're going through that country and the terrain and how like just brutally rugged it is.
mhm,
And I'm there for 7, 8 days, and by the time I'm there for 7 or 8 days, I'm like, man, like I like doing this, but I'm ready to go. I'm ready to have like some comforts of some sort. Like I'm whooped. You know what I
yeah,
mean? In the Montana trip, it was 2 weeks.
right,
Um, and you just think about like how rugged and gnarly that country is, and that's just like their everyday. You
yeah,
know what I mean? And it's nothing to them. You know
right,
what I mean? And that's the part to me that always kind of gets me is just like how brutally unforgiving the place is that they live and they thrive there.
right,
You know, and
yeah,
that just like, it makes me just think like, man, how tough are they? Not just like physically, but the, at least in Idaho, it's like the predators they have to avoid with like, grizzlies and mountain lions and wolves and stuff. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
not only is the terrain just like brutal, but they also have these apex predators that they have to navigate. And you're just like, I'm like, I wouldn't make it a year out here. You know what I mean?
No, right, right.
But
Yeah, and just I shot the elk inside a burn. It was a pretty extensive burn in 20, 2020, I think. And it's just wild. Like just the like you said, just how rugged it is and how beautiful it is all at the same time. It's wild. It's just like a crazy feeling.
yeah, you're like, man, this place is beautiful, and it'll kill you.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so
Where's the
so
mountain lions at?
right, exactly. What so did you end up taping him? Like how big was he?
I taped him when I got home, so he hasn't dried yet, and he's at the taxidermist. Um, but I taped him at 294.
Oh, that's a great bull, dude. For your first bull,
Yeah,
like you're
yeah.
like you're ruined. Like
I know.
like
so
that's a great bull. It's
so
like
I think Pope is 260. If I think
yeah, I've got no
I have to look
clue.
again, but
All I know is like
Chad was like, "Oh, that's awesome, Pope, great."
yeah, all I
I was
know
like,
is that
"Okay,
like a 300 bull is like a very very like respectable, really good bull.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like the 300 mark is like, oh, that's a good bull. You know what I mean? Like I don't know anything about elk, but like the guys that I do know who elk hunt religiously, or live out west, it's like a 300 bull is like, man, that's a good bull.
yeah."
Like so. Yeah, you're ruined, man. First
I
elk,
know,
like it's like, you know,
I know. I literally was going there like, if I shoot one that's got like as minimally legal as possible, I will shoot it. Like,
right?
we could
Exactly.
even shoot cows where we were going, and I was like, oh, if get to a couple days in and it's we're not having a lot of encounters, I'm probably going to shoot a cow because you just want to shoot, like you just want to experience it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I would have in Idaho if a cow was legal. It's like I would have took that business all day.
Yeah,
That was gonna happen. I mean, I would have probably done that on the first day.
right.
Just based on like where we were hunting and like the gnarliness of the place. It's like
Yeah,
getting close to one within shooting distance was not a given just in general. So
right.
but so you have that hunt, man. So you're coming back on a high there. So now let's jump into some whitetail. You down to jump into some whitetails?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. So before we jump into it, man, what was your like? I mean, we share a lot of information. Like we hunt one particular place together, and then
Yep,
aside from that, like we're always sharing trail camera photos. You know, we're talking strategy together or texting about strategy. And, I'll be
yep,
like, I got this deer over here. Like, I think this is what he's doing. And we'll talk about it. And he'll be like, I got this deer over here. I think this is how I need to hunt him. And so we're always kind of going back and forth with that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
when you were headed into this year, I know you were feeling pretty good because you had some places kind of really dialed in. So what were your thoughts kind of as you were approaching, for you at least October 1st, because I know you opened during the state opener, statewide opener.
Yeah, so I mean, I would like you just said, we send trail camera pictures back and forth, even if it's not spots that we hunt together. It's just like, we're both good resources for each other.
Mm,
So, um, this one particular, like, we'll call it my core area because I don't hunt there all the time. I have a couple spots that I bounce around to, but um, we'll call it the core area because I hung the most cameras there this year. But
right.
there, I mean, I sent you, it was lit up with bucks
Yeah.
in velvet and leading up to October 1st. So I just, had a really great feeling about the season, and we had at least six bucks that we really really liked, and two out of those six were real studs,
Hmm.
and just really good expectations because we've been um there's a couple people that hunt it with me. My buddy Jared and Troy, helped me hang cameras out there and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so we just were really hopeful and kind of had figured it out, dialed it in the year before, and all the intel that we were getting was very similar. So we were like, oh, we feel like we have a grasp on this year. And um, I shot my buck in there last year too.
Hmm.
So I got home. on October 3rd, so I missed the opener,
Yeah.
which was kind of a bummer to me because I love hunting the opener in this particular area because it actually, it's pretty. Sometimes it can be pretty good for the opener.
Yeah.
Um, but the weather was crap here in PA. It was raining a lot anyway that day, so I felt like I didn't miss too much. And you know, so my expectations of the season were pretty great, and all my areas that I was planning to hunt had decent bucks in it and that kind of thing, and good cell cam info and this and that. So that was my expectation. As far as getting out, I had a lot of vacation time, so I got out some mid-October hunts, and they were great. I was seeing does, seeing some bucks here and there. Um,
And
saw a
then
really
go ahead.
saw a really great buck mid-October. I think it was like the 12th or 13th. Wouldn't get closer, 55 yards, but
So, are there any, I've talked about this on the show multiple times, at least from my perspective. Are there any kind of key dates in that October timeframe that you have found, like, just annually, that have worked for you in specific areas in your core area? Or are you still kind of like, or are you still kind of evaluating that and just gathering more intel?
um, no, there is some pretty specific key dates. I really think, between the 14th and 18th of October, you have a spurt of good morning activity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the earlier part seems to be like, as far as cameras go, this year was a little bit different because it was a lot hotter this year
Yeah.
in early October than it has been the last 3 years. So I think that was really pushing them towards the evening because I have had some morning pictures in that early part, but that really wasn't happening this year. But I still had that little burst of, daylight stuff October 14th through the 18th,
Right.
and nothing specific. I would say, terrain pinch points and some scrape activity between the 14th and the 18th.
Okay.
It's kind of like a good little burst there.
Yeah, and that kind of holds true with what I've seen, because there's, everyone who listens to this show knows that, I like dates in and around there. I've got a couple specific dates for certain spots, but I
Mm-hmm.
saw the same thing. I didn't have a whole lot of activity this year in comparison to years prior. This year was like, so far, has was way down, and I would just say this year was way down in terms of, like, just October inventory and stuff in general. But yeah, those dates are the same kind of area that I look at too, and there's always like a pop of early morning activity, and the mornings are always the coolest part of the day too. So it's like, if you get that little,
Exactly.
if you're going to get a pop and it's warm, it's going to be, in those, at the very outset of daylight.
Yeah, and I would say we probably only had three somewhat significant temperature drops in October this year. And normally, you'll have like a couple days spurts of, temp drops compared, but it
Mm-hmm.
just really wasn't that way this year.
No, and the bummer was I missed one of them because I was sick, which sucked.
Yeah, yeah,
That really bummed me out because I was fired. I mean, I missed the first cold front, and it's always that
yeah, I
first one always
remember.
seems to be like, always seems to be good for whatever reason, because it's the first one. You know what I mean? Like, it's, it feels like everything's kind of pent up and you're just waiting to kind of like let the first little bit of activity loose on that first kind of those first kind of cold days, or that first snap of cold days. So
Yeah.
I was
Well,
pretty bummed out.
and I'll talk about that for a second too. Is I uh maybe the 8th of October this was. I went back to work on the 9th or the 10th actually.
Yeah,
So
because
I think it
that
was,
first front was like the 5th through the 8th or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
it was somewhere in there. So I think it was the 6th, 7th, 8th, somewhere in there. Um, I went out, and my buddy that wasn't out was texting me pictures from all the cell cams. Is like, oh, is there, and I'm not even close to him.
Right.
And then he texts me a picture from the cell cam that I'm sitting like 60 yards away from with a buck on it. And I never saw it because it was in, that thing's in real thick stuff.
Right.
And then he's texting me pictures of bucks coming up on this terrain feature that we have. Like it's just a little point in the middle of a big bowl, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And there's bucks on this thing fighting and stuff. And this was a camera that we weren't like, it was kind of a flyer, like, oh, let's put one down here and see what happens, or
Right.
whatever. And there's bucks on it like all morning. I'm like, what is all that about? Didn't get any bucks on it for a couple days, and then it was kind of like sporadic. Like there'd be one running through, and with the non HD or whatever on the camera that he had, couldn't really tell if it's nice or not.
Right.
Then one evening he gets this picture of a good one. Rack is okay, but the body is just like 4-year-old body, like big deer,
Right. Yeah.
And we got a couple pictures of that thing. I'm like, I'm going there tomorrow morning. And it's it's odd because this spot is likely a rut cruising spot. Like it's wide open,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there's nice terrain features that they could cruise and get some good wind on the bowl, and then coming across a point and that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, this is kind of weird because this is not the kind of place I would be hunting in mid-October. But there was a deer down here last night, so we're gonna give it a go. And then I said to him, I was like, I think this camera's been pretty streaky, but we haven't really paid it much attention to it because we know all the other cameras are like wild.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks back and he's like, yeah, you're right. And he like sends me a picture of a buck just about every other day in daylight from October 1st, and this is pretty deep in timber. Like this is nowhere near any type of destination foods or nothing.
Right.
And, I go down in there the next morning, and doesn't that buck, he's up on that bowl, like coming across, and he goes over top of the point. And he didn't listen to grunts, snort, wheezes, or anything. He wouldn't get closer than 55 yards. He turned and looked my way. And, he's probably 120, 125 inch, 7 point, whatever he is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got no interest in coming my direction. But the deer he's just like a stud animal, huge, huge body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was kind of a mid-October, or I guess not that was not the 8th, but on that first cold front, that's when we noticed all those bucks starting to come up onto that thing in the daylight.
Now,
So that was,
did that movement hold true like throughout October?
yeah,
It did.
it
So,
did.
what have you surmised as to why you're getting this movement that's not close to? I mean, are you assuming that you're in and around on top of their beds essentially? Is it one buck? Is it multiple bucks? I guess let's do that first.
There were a few bucks on that point.
Okay.
Definitely one that seemed to be pretty regular. Like he would be on there pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he might have been bedding in a bottom because every time we had him on camera, he was coming up from the bottom,
Hmm.
which would be a draw in private. But there's so many folds in this place. Like, we're on one big knob, but as you look down into it, when you get up in the tree, you can kind of see down. There's a bunch of little knobs as you go
Okay.
down through this valley. So it could have been a bedding area. He looked like he was going back to bed when I saw him crossing above me.
Okay.
Um,
So he's bedded not far away then from where
he's
that thing is.
he has to be. He
Right.
has to be.
So that's a nice little thing to file away for next year.
Yep.
Is like that spot there seems like a heater at the beginning of the year. And, would you be thinking now setting up more on top of that, on closer to the top of that ridge where you've seen him cross?
Right. So when you kind of go up, I was in there today because I pulled all these cameras out today, and you do notice that there's more of a trail that goes around. We'll call it the base of the point, not the tip of the point, but kind of the base.
Mm-hmm.
This bowl connects to that, and then he kind of crosses over it that way because it's not a very long point. It's small.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think I'm probably going to run 2 cameras in there next year just to see, get them coming up onto this point, but then also to see, are they crossing around that way? because then I think you get a better idea of how you should be hunting that. Like, do you need to be hunting on the cruising trail that's the bowl, or do you need to be on the point where they cross over the tip of that?
Right.
So
Hmm. All right. So that's the first kind of cold front and stuff like that. And so later part of October comes, and I know that you like to try to get your buck killed early. That's one of the
yeah,
things you
that's
like
my
to,
thing.
that's your jam. So, you had a situation, shall we say.
Shall we say? Yeah, this is the thing that no bow hunter likes to do is wound an animal, and laying it all out there. I went into an area that I've run a trail camera in for 3 years, and I had one in there this year. A couple things happened with it. I hang it on a scrape. The scrape, when the licking branch lost their leaves, it pulled the branches up too high because
Mm.
the bush is a lot taller now,
Mm-hmm.
and they stopped using it. But also, my camera died on the 12th.
Mm.
So, and it was a cell cam, so I was not getting pictures, but I was like, well, I was getting pictures all through September and through the beginning of October. Does are hitting that thing all the time. I know they're in there, a couple small bucks here and there. And I said, I know from, that last 2 weeks in October, 8:30 is not really an uncommon time for a deer to be going through there.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into that area. I had picked out, like, I always have a hard time finding a tree in the dark. So I specifically made myself choose some when I hung that camera this year on a trail that they normally come up
Mm-hmm.
along the end of this ridge. And I was like, there, I said, I'm going to go in there. It was, I think, the 28th. So I got to the tree, no problem, got in nice and clean, got up the tree. Wind was perfect for the setup. Does came in, and my wind is blowing towards them just off. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's the way they come in from down below you, and the thermals pick up so fast in there. Like, as soon as the sun is up at all, they they're going up. So my wind is blowing way over their head and just off enough that they're not catching the angle on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched three does filter into the bedding area that I know they go to. Watched a small buck go after them, and then around 9 o'clock, I had I saw another deer coming, and I saw the white above his head, and I thought, man, that looks like a good one. But he's going to be, at that point in time, he's going to be like 60 yards, 65 yards away from me.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets to the spot where all the deer, before they went into the bedding area, he stopped, and I grunted and I snort wheezed at him. And he turned on a dime and came straight down in the direction of my tree, branched out a little bit, and he's going to try to catch my wind. But he mustn't have heard me well enough, because he was going to end up still being upwind of me.
Mm.
And I'm like, I'm going to get a broadside shot at this deer. So he goes, there's a big bushy tree in, between he and I draw my bow, and he comes around that tree, and he's now he's starting to turn back up the hill and turn broadside. And when he got out from behind that tree, there's still some like saplings and stuff like that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And when he turned, because he wasn't behind that bushy tree anymore, it looked like he was completely in the open. And I settled my pin, let the arrow fly, and I heard a crack, and I could see the tree. I could see some branches wiggling, and I'm like, oh no. And I saw the arrow sticking out of his back ham, like in the front of it. So I think what happened was, my theory is I didn't get any penetration. The broadhead went in, the arrow tip, like the tip of the arrow split, and the insert and the broadhead came out, like, broke off.
Mm.
But like, I have the entire arrow otherwise. So I think it literally just went into his bone, and I was kind of hoping, get lucky and hit some kind of artery, but I think I just hit the bone right under the skin, and got nothing.
Right.
I had a little bit of a blood trail. You can't really, it was like a spot here, and then it looked like maybe he bedded down and bled a little more, and then uh, kept going, and I just lost blood. And I didn't look for blood right away, obviously, because I already knew it was a bad shot.
Right.
I tried calling 8 dog trackers. They all said, "You're not going to find the deer. If he dies, he's going to die in days." And they're like, "But let us know if you find him, so we can learn something." Yeah,
Solid.
thanks, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. So I, gave it my best shot, and the last one was actually kind of helpful. And he's like, "Well, probably not going to find the deer. To me, it sounds like he hit the femur. If he dies, he's going to die from an infection, but he might make it." And then he said, "If I were you, I would go back in and look for him tonight, because if in fact if you hit anything that's worthwhile, you hit his femoral artery. You should go back and look for him." So that's why I went back in, and Chad was giving me a lot of advice on that too. Like,
Mhm.
you could have hit this, and he was being so encouraging and helpful.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You really going to want to listen for coyotes in the evening," which I did. As it's starting to get dark, didn't hear any. Um, was really just kind of hoping to follow a little bit of blood I had and see a deer piled up 150 yards away. And I grid searched. I looked for about 6 hours, or for about 4 hours, and came up with nothing.
Yeah.
So I was
Dude,
pretty bummed.
yeah.
He was really good. He was a really good 8 pointer, and um,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
you were bumming pretty hard, dude. Like I was
yeah, it was,
up in the North Piece actually that weekend.
yeah,
And I called you on my way home.
mm-hmm,
And yeah, and like you said, man, it's one of those things no one ever wants to make a shot like that,
yeah,
or the same thing happened to me when I was in Missouri. It's
right,
clipped a small little branch and sounded, when you were describing it to me, I think you even said that where it sounds similar to where it's, you clipped something just enough to where it turned your arrow sideways, where you almost slapped him rather than
exactly,
the arrow actually penetrating him, hitting him perpendicularly.
right,
You know, um, and when I say slapped him, I mean, that it hit it not head on, it hit it like it hit it off the side of the broadhead to where
right,
you're not going to get any penetration and nothing good's going to happen, you
right,
know. But as well as anybody else, that stuff happens, and
yeah,
most likely you do it long enough, it's going to happen to you multiple times,
yeah,
So
and at that point in time, it's kind of hard to stay positive, but you just have to. Like,
it is,
if
yeah,
you want to keep hunting, and you want to keep, like, if you do this enough, it's going to happen to you. Like, I haven't hit a deer like that for a very, very long time, and but even it happens to the best people.
yeah, yeah, 100%, man, and it is hard to come back from. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like it does knock you in the dirt for a little bit. I mean, I think the hard thing, uh, well, one of the hard things about bow hunting is just um, how much of a grind it can be, and how much opportunity there is in a multitude of ways for self doubt to start to creep in.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, um, I know for me, it's like I have it. You know what I mean? Like it creeps in, and I got to try to fight it off. Because it'll screw you up. You know what I mean? It's like
yep,
it'll knock you off your plan, and and whatever the plan might be, if it's a year long plan or the plan for the day or whatever the case is, and it'll break your concentration, and it'll make you make more mistakes. And so it's hard to get yourself out of that funk. But I usually try to give myself 24 hours to kind of stew in whatever it is, you know what I mean? Or,
yep,
shorter if I have to get out and hunt like right away again or whatever the case is. But I try to give myself a little time to be human and be pissed off, you know?
yep, yeah,
it,
absolutely,
and then go, all right, well, let's start over, let's do this again, So, but anyway, you got back on the saddle,
yep.
figuratively and literally back in the saddle, to redeem yourself. So how did all all the next few hunts kind of go down?
Dude, it was just it was, I spent I did a couple more hunts after that. I kind of, some of them are a blur, but the next best time I went in there, I had a cold front, and I was like, you know what? I had no deer on that. I changed the batteries in that camera that day, and I was like, I have no deer on that camera, but I'm gonna just go back there because I know there's cruisers in there. I know it heats up. Like, I'm just gonna do it. So I went back in there, and everybody's texting me, and I'm like, it's a good morning. I saw a lot of deer on the way in here. I'm, I'm fired up about it, and everybody's texting me like, oh, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, and I'm thinking, well, I always see deer in here at 8:30. If anything starts cruising, it's always at 8:30. So I'm gonna give it a whirl. So I just kept telling myself, you need to be patient. Kept telling people, oh, I'll see deer around 8:30. I texted my wife at 8:32, and I hear deer coming. So I pick up my bow, and I see antlers coming. I'm like, that'll do. And he came to about 5 yards and gets behind a tree, and he looks straight up at me. I have no idea how he didn't bust me. I think the sun was behind me, and he does the head bob, puts his head down, puts his head back up, and then he just keeps walking. I'm like, what in the world? This deer's 5 yards away, just looks up at me, and nothing happened.
Hmm.
So uh, I drew my bow. When he put his head down, his eyes were like facing the dirt. So I drew my bow, and he walks out to about 8 yards. And, you know, at that point in time, I had enough time to have a little bit of adrenaline, but not crazy. And I was like, you got to get it together. So I just made myself settle my pin into my feet before I even put it on the deer. I swung my bow over, put it, and I said, heart shots only, and put it right where I thought his heart would be, and let it fly. I watched the deer run up the hill 60 yards. He turned back around and is running straight at me, and he tips over at 50.
Nice.
And I was just like, I was like, hell yeah, I can't believe I just did that. And, you're like watching him, and he's like stone cold dead, like
Mm-hmm.
not even, And I called my wife, and she's like, what's wrong? And I was like, I just shot a buck. And she's like, I just got your text. And I was like, yeah, I know. I just shot a buck. So she, I texted her at 8:32, and I called her at 8:34.
Nice.
So
That's funny.
yeah, it was wild, man. And it was a cool morning. It was one of those mornings where you just felt like you were going to kill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
Uh,
I got in clean. Everything was quiet. My setup was right. I got to watch the lunar eclipse from my saddle. It was kind of cool.
nice.
Uh,
Heck yeah, man. I was
but
super stoked for you, dude, because you were bumming pretty hard prior to that. And
yeah,
and I was just glad that you were able to, not redeem yourself necessarily, not that I don't have a better way to say it, but just, coming back from a miss is tough, and just to
yeah,
kind of stay in the game, and then not only, you know, to, be able to fill your tag, but like be able to put the shot on that deer that you did. Cause sometimes when you make a bad shot, man, it like a one bad shot could beget a whole string of bad shots. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like
It's hard after that. You gotta, like, making yourself say you gotta get it together is a really hard thing to do because it's just in the back of your mind, like, don't do it again, don't do it again. And if you
yeah,
remind yourself, don't do it again, you're gonna do it again
yeah, exactly.
because that's all you can think about.
That's right. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's, it's like the old basketball scene, shooter gonna shoot. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Like
Yep.
you got to just continue to let them rip. And, cause the other thing is too, is like the first instance you had this year wasn't because you're not a good shot. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing too. But that's where the self-doubt stuff starts to creep in, because you start to think like, well, I made this mistake and that's why it happened. It's like, well, you didn't really make a mistake. It's like, there were circumstances that you didn't see or didn't recognize that most people probably wouldn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Right.
that caused it. It wasn't because your shot was bad. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like there's a difference between taking a bad shot and the arrow that you release not landing where you want it to. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference
Yeah.
between those two things.
Yeah.
Taking a
And
bad,
it,
making a bad shot is like when there's nothing but air and opportunity between you and the deer, and you stick it in the leg. You know what I mean?
right.
Like that's
Right.
that's a bad shot. That means like you just shit the bed. You know, in your case, it was, there was some stuff in the way. You know what I mean? Like there
Right.
just isn't, wasn't visible. And like,
Right.
but your arrow was true otherwise. And so
Right.
there's no reason for you to think that the next deer that shows up in front of you that you can't stick him. So I was stoked. Not only that you filled
Yeah,
your
man.
tag, but that was able to kind of, that the shot was like not just good, but was money.
Oh yeah, straight through the heart. I was so pumped. And to
Nice.
watch a deer tip over like that is just a cool.
Dude, that is the best.
Oh, it's so cool.
Like
So
when
cool.
you know that there's no tracking, like that's the
Yep.
best. Like where you're
Oh,
like,
I didn't even look. I mean, I saw the blood on the way to him because it was everywhere, but I was like, didn't even have to look, you
yeah,
know?
those are the best. Where it's like I don't even have to worry about it. I know he's dead. I know right where he's
Yeah.
laying. I'm just gonna walk up to him and get my buck.
And I think the one really hard thing about wounding a deer too is when you work so hard to get a certain caliber of deer
Mm-hmm.
and you find it. The deer I killed, I'm really happy with. He's 110 inches
Mm-hmm.
for public land. I'm happy with that.
Heck yeah.
For me, I'm happy with that every day at this point in my hunting career. But the deer that I hit was at the time I probably didn't think he was, but he was significantly bigger than the one that I killed.
Right.
And that kind of makes it hard too. Just
Yeah.
like the size of the animal, because you're like, oh, I almost got to, I dream about that deer all the time, yada yada. But
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we always have like these, you know, goals or, you know, spend all this time, whether it's scouting or running cameras and you're always looking for the best representation of the animal for your area. That's kind of like
yeah,
the way I like to put it. Like, you know, score, number, whatever it happens to be, you're just looking
mm-hmm.
for the best representation of what that area has to offer. Some places offer more than others. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah, yeah,
depending, right? Um,
yeah.
and
But
so
one of the well, keep going. Go ahead.
no, I was going
Sorry.
to say, and so, whenever you have that as your sights being set and you have the target, right? It's like so it's like you set that as a site and then you do the work and then you find the target, like, and so you affirm that thing exists in that area, right? Through trail cameras or
Right.
through observation or whatever the case is. And then the opportunity with said target presents, that's when it makes it difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the hard part because like all the steps lined up,
Right.
so
Right. And one of the cool. Honestly, this is probably one of my favorite hunts. It was. I told you I called my wife and told all my buddies, oh, I shot smoking 8 pointer, yada yada, And I called my one buddy who was like, oh, if you shoot one, I'm going to be home today. Just give me a call. I'll help you get it out. And I called him and I was like, yo, I shot an 8 pointer. It's down. I already, he's like, oh, I have time. Why don't you want me? He's like, why don't you come out and get me? Because he didn't have his car.
mm-hmm.
And he was like, why don't you come out and get me? And, then we can come get it out. And I was like, well, my wife can drive you up the mountain and then, just meet me back here. I'll start quartering it a while. And he was like, okay. So my wife calls me and she goes, Jared wants to know how much bullshit he has to go through. And I was like, well, he's been here with me. I don't know what the big deal is. Like, he knows what's in here. She's like, well, oh, and I said, it's that place where you and I hung a camera together 2 years ago. Oh, yeah, yeah, that place. So Jared comes back and I'm thinking, is my wife coming to help me take out a deer? And, Jared comes back there and she's not with him. And I was like, oh, I guess not. So Jared and I are like quartering this deer and he whistles and I'm like, oh, is there a deer over there? And he's like, no. And I like look over and my wife is walking through the woods.
Mm-hmm.
She logged into my Onyx and I, I want to preface this by saying my wife gets lost often.
Right.
So she logged into my Onyx and figured out how to use it and found us.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and she's like, all pumped up to come and see. I've never gotten to. I shot a buck with her one time in rifle season on my buddy's farm, but
Right.
never an experience like that. And then she brought a backpack and she put all the clothes in it and stuff, and we all packed that deer out together. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
The my Megan is not doing that. Just
yeah,
yeah, so you'll never hear me say, "Yeah, I was in the woods and my wife showed up." Like, nope.
yeah. Well, she goes, "Well, don't expect this every time," and I was like, "I don't," but I feel pretty special, right? It was pretty cool.
Right,
So
right. That's awesome, man.
yeah,
Yeah, dude, I was stoked for you, man. That's a good way to kind of end your archery season. So you
it
pulled
was
cams
good.
today, man. Like, uh, so this, happens probably often. Like, I know at least for me, it's like every year when I pull cams and stuff like that, and I go through like all the final pictures that I haven't looked at or whatever. And like, hell, there's some cameras that I don't even get to, like, or areas that I've scouted that I don't even get to hunt. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like, and I go back and I pull cameras I might have close by or whatever, and I'll flip through and I'll be like, oh man, I should have been here that day, or oh man, look, there's that buck's living here, or whatever the case is. You know what I mean? There's always like one or two
Yeah.
bucks that are going to haunt me for the entire off season because of
Yeah.
like either cams I didn't check, or just areas I didn't make it to. So you pulled all your cams today. What did you? Any gems?
Well, man, even I pulled some last. I like to get them all out before rifle season.
Yeah,
Just saves me a couple cameras, right? And I sent you pictures from ones I pulled last week, and like, oh, I should have
dude.
been there, and
Yeah, dude. The scrape week. Yeah, like
should have been there that
oh,
week,
dude. Yeah, for sure.
like multiple times.
Yeah.
And
That was a slam dunk on that one.
oh,
Like
geez,
you had multiple opportunities to kill that one.
yeah, yeah, and and I even had a buck bust me in there, and it like October 20th,
Oh,
like
that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
yeah. So I was like, man, I should have been at this spot. And I didn't hunt that spot one time because it was like kind of a crappy scrape. It wasn't like a baller scrape, It was oh, it's a scrape on the edge of this, whatever. It looks good. Put a camera here. Why not? It was a new area for me, right?
Right.
Like an area I hadn't hunted, whatever. And I was like, this looks good. Oh, there's a scrape there. Looks edges, things coming out, bedding. Yeah, that looks good. So that was that. But then, so today's a different area. This is where all our cameras are, or whatever. So my buddy Troy and I, between the two of us, he had 6 cell cams in there, and I think I had 8 regular cameras or something. So
Mhm.
I had to go. I want to pull all these. So I was checking the cards before we got on, and I sent you a video of that one already. But
Yeah.
there was one 8-pointer that we were chasing nonstop. Like I have pictures of the deer in June, in July, in August, in September. I literally have a picture, multiple pictures of this deer every month. And, from October through today, I have pictures almost every day of that deer on at least one camera, if not more than one camera.
Mm-hmm.
And, I sent you a picture of him. He was on like one scrape at 11:15 last night. And then this morning he was on. But I had hung a camera in a very unconventional, high foot traffic. Like people walk on this thing all the time. I showed you there was a guy taking a piss in front of my camera.
Yeah, he almost got the old Willie show there.
And he had no clue it was there.
Nope.
Uh, so um, I had this target buck on that camera 20 minutes after light, or 20 minutes after dark. And had I been hunting that area, like I said, the areas usually heat up 14th through the 18th. Well, this year, a lot of it was evening movement because of it being 75 degrees out.
Right.
I had the deer on camera 20 minutes after dark, and I would have been hunting him in the direction that he was further in the direction that he was coming from. So I would have had an opportunity. And I hunted that spot 3 days before he showed up on that camera at that time.
Yeah.
And I had that deer on that camera multiple times. And I'm like, you know, you always sometimes these are the overlooked things. You know, it's the high foot traffic. Like, well, of
Mm-hmm.
course you're not going to hunt where the people walk.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to look stupid.
That's just it, man. Like,
Like I'd be sitting there and somebody come in and be like, "That guy's an idiot. He's sitting right there." Well, I could have killed a buck right there. Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's,
uh,
yeah, man. I mean, there's always those overlooked spots. Sometimes I think we outthink ourselves
yeah,
uh,
I
on
agree.
on some of this stuff. Um, and then it always does seem, when I go to pull cameras, just like to your point, where in hindsight's 2020. It's like there's nothing you can really do about it unless you can tell the future. But like, there's always like a buck that I'm like a day or even just like hours behind him, or he's
Right,
hours in front of me. You know what I
right.
mean? To where it's like just miss, like ships passing in the night.
Yep.
Just constantly. But
Why
go ahead.
I hunted him too the 25th or the 26th because we got a picture of him coming out of the bedding area at 7 p.m. And I was like, tomorrow morning he's going to be here.
Hmm.
And I hunted over a camera and I pulled that SD card and he was on the camera 3 hours before I got there.
Hmm.
You know,
Jeez.
yeah,
Yeah, dude. It's always the way it seems to go. But that's why we like it, man. It's like
exactly.
it's always unpredictable, and even when you think you got things figured out, you end up just realizing how little you actually know. In a
Yeah,
lot of cases, and that's even the case for like you know guys like Jake Bush or whatever. The podcast I just did with him, like he's having a
yep,
really rough season
yeah,
this year. But the thing the silver lining that he's kind of pulled out of all of it is that, man, he's just learning so much more that maybe you don't recognize or that you overlook or whatever, because you're just, focused on a particular deer. When you have a season to where I almost equate it to, like an athlete getting injured and being forced to watch the game and see it from a different perspective.
right,
Always gives them a different point of view when they actually get back on the field. They see things
right,
more holistically now.
right, right,
They see better how they fit into the, to the picture or whatever the
right.
case is. You know what I mean? Um, and I think that that's, when we think we got it all figured out, something shows up and makes us realize that we don't know nearly as much as we think that we do.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's part of it. That's part of like what the attraction is that is the is that slim chance that you're going to be right.
Yep.
And that's the hard part of it too, is that all that preparation is for that 30 seconds that you get to
Right.
try to make it try to make it a successful season, or not successful season, because don't measure success in filled tags or whatever, but
Right.
you get that 20 to 30 seconds to fill the tag that year,
Yep.
and that's it. And a lot of times, in your instance, you got a great second opportunity. A lot of
Oh,
times,
absolutely.
it's like you don't get that second opportunity. It's like, especially
Yep.
a state like PA with all the pressure and stuff like that, you get one, and that's
Exactly.
probably going to be it for you, and that's the thing that kind of kicks my rear end, is like, it's like that same spot that I've had the encounter the past 2 years on the same freaking date. It's like, I'm in the right spot. I just can't get the deer to do what I need them to do. And I can't really set up any differently. And it's just like, there's nothing more I could do. I was at the right
Right.
place, watched the deer bed for 2 hours. Like, I literally just needed
Yeah.
him to get up and walk in a certain direction, 20 yards, and
Yep.
it was good. And he just wasn't going to do it that day.
Yep.
It's like, and what are you going to do? It's like, and that, for me, it's like, I look at that and I'm like, that's the one encounter I will probably have with a mature deer this year in that,
Yep.
in this area, And so, I mean, if I get a second one, it'll be a red letter year, if that were
Yeah.
to happen. So what's so now you got 2 tags filled, man. What's Aaron Hepler's plan for the rest of the season, dude? Like, you're on
Dude, I
easy
got.
street. You're sleeping in.
Well, yeah. I mean, I already went doe hunting once, and that didn't pan out. So, I'll be filling my last 3 doe tags with the boomstick, I think.
Oh, there you go.
Um, I got a buddy or two that could use a rifle spot and probably a hand packing out. So I'll have fun doing that, I think. But
Right.
yeah.
I'm
But
thinking
speaking
some,
of encounters, though, man, what about you? You freaking had all kinds of them in the Kansas world.
dude, Kansas was fun, dude. It's a love-hate relationship with me and Kansas now. I think
Yeah.
we're official. I'll put it that way. We're official. You know, I'm in love with the plains, and ground hunting. Um, but it's definitely a love-hate relationship.
Dude, you came home with some wild stories.
Man, it's you know, it, I'm still mad about it. I guess I should just kind of get on with like what happened, because I haven't even mentioned anything on the podcast yet about how that whole trip went. But essentially, so I got out there, and it took me a little bit to get there, a couple of days, because I was working from the trailer and kind of driving at
Right.
night after work and stuff like that. And so I got out there on Friday night, kind of late-ish, if you will.
Hmm.
I think I pulled into like the campsite that I was staying at around like 11:30, something like that. But I got up the next morning. Like, so the nice thing was, is like daylight savings hadn't happened yet out there. So like, I think first light was like 8 o'clock almost, or something
Yeah.
like that. Um, and so, which was kind of nice, because I got to get a little bit of sleep. But my plan that day was really to go to this spot that I found last year, um, where I could see a lot and just set up in glass. And the plan was like, at minimum, I was going to glass the entire morning. And if I wasn't seeing a whole lot or whatever, then I might just end up sitting at that spot the entire day and just glassing, because I wanted to kind of watch and see what the deer were doing, and like what areas they were using, where they were kind of moving to, if they were cutting does out, like what was the activity, and where were they, like what area were they preferring to kind of move to. I had an idea from
Yeah.
the previous year, um, but just wasn't. We had such limited time in that place last year, because that was like literally the last spot we ended up at last year, and I think Chad spent 2 days there with me. Or one day with me there, and I spent. Oh no, he spent 2 days there with me, and I think I spent 2 days there by myself, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Hmm.
And so we didn't have a whole lot of time there. So I just really wanted to learn, and so I glassed that whole morning and saw a bunch of does out in these kind of like winter wheat fields. That it's the way this kind of place sets up. It's like a hill, and there's like some winter wheat, and there's some buffer strips of CRP. It's just kind of classic, Kansas. But it's an area that
Right.
like we actually found that had more structure than pretty much anywhere else we had seen or glassed. Like there was actually
Okay.
like felt like there was things that were going to like move deer and provide cover and food, all kind of like in the same like area.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you had more opportunity to glass where you were this year compared to last year.
Yeah, 100%, which is why we kind of liked it. And it was the spot that we had seen the most deer out of the entire trip last year. Like
Right.
we saw more deer and shooter bucks in this spot in a very small window of time than we did almost the entire rest of the 2-week trip combined.
Right.
So I knew that there were deer there, and that was kind of why I started there. So there was that piece, plus all the like, other, focusing basically on like weehaw. And so like there was other, aside from that piece, there was other weehaw that was around that I could kind of get to also check out. So I could kind of hit a bunch of
Hmm.
different spots. And so I glassed all morning, or for most of the morning, and I saw, what I thought was a decent buck, but I didn't have a whole lot of light. And he wasn't running does. He was just kind of like, there were does out kind of feeding. So he was just kind of like seeing what was up. He
Right.
was stiff legged walking through, and he would stop, and the does would like not run away from him, but just kind of like bound away, like a little bit of ways from him, and then stop and start feeding again. And they weren't close. So he wasn't pressing. He was just kind of like, who's about to party. And then after that, I saw a really good deer. Now I couldn't tell exactly how big he was, but I mean, I'm talking like several hundred yards away. I'm glassing, and without a spotter or binos, like I saw him, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good deer. And he just kind of walked away from me and wasn't really in play. And then shortly after that, I saw another one that was a shooter, and he was actually coming down to this bottom where I had an encounter with a good deer last year. And so as he was making his way down, I was like, oh shit, he's going to actually walk into that bottom. So as he's making his way there, I literally like jumped in the truck, drove down the road as far as I could, like where I thought I could possibly intercept him. Literally just grabbed my bow and some antlers and ran into the woods and set up like about where I thought I could cut him off. A
Yeah.
couple rattling sequences and stuff like that, and he never showed. So I don't know in hindsight. So rattling didn't work as well there this year as it had last year, and I have
Mm-hmm.
a hypothesis as to why. But so that deer was like a non player. And then that evening there was an area on the backside of this public, or on the backside of this weehaw, that kind of has this like again, there's like a winter wheat field that's kind of wrapped around with some CRP, and there's like some cedars and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
last year I had seen a big deer cut a doe out into this draw and set up back there to hunt that big deer. He never came out, but it was a really, really good setup where there was two very clear trails that were kind of coming out into this field that you could kind of set up in between. There's no
Mm-hmm.
trees or anything to get in, so I just was in a ghillie jacket tucked down into the CRP and had four does
Right.
work their way out. Read the script 100%. Like all I needed was there to be a buck like following one of them. They walked by me at 10 yards, and
Mm-hmm.
and that was it. There was no buck. So that was the first day. And so the next morning, the plan really was, I saw what I needed to kind of see as far as movement and stuff like that. There's this one draw that's there that on the left side there's like a bunch of cedars, and on the right side there's like a locust thicket, or not. I won't say a locust thicket. It's a locust grove, really. It's like kind of locust trees, kind of spread out, and a
Right.
bunch of locust pods on the ground that the deer like to feed on. In the year prior, like we watched bucks cut does out and just run them to that area, and the reason is because there's some private right over there that's like kind of like gnarly CRP, and then on the backside of the weehaw is like a cut bean field, then like I think another food source field. I think it's also like winter wheat, and then it drops into like all this CRP, and it's just freaking gnarly, dude. Like just nasty. And so they would cut them out and head to one of those two places. And so knowing that, I was like, and this was like the sixth. And historically, I got some buddies that like to hunt out there a lot. They've hunted that just this general area for years, and they're like, dude, the sixth is the magic day. Like, do not miss the sixth. If do
Yep.
anything, be there on the sixth. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna go set up in that area, on the sixth. So I head up there, and my plan was I didn't want to kick any deer out. And so I was like, I want to make it part way up this draw, and I want to stop. I want to let daylight break, and then I want to glass to make sure there's no deer up there, monkeying around that I end up blowing out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I get into where I want to get into, and I'm kind of just like hanging out, and daylight has just cracked, and I'm like kind of glassing, checking things out, making sure I'm not going to blow any deer out. And I look to my right, and there's a really nice 8 point, probably, he was 125, 130, probably.
Okay.
Regardless, it's like I was willing to shoot him,
Right.
put it that way.
Right. Because
And
you're not there to shoot booners. You're there to have a good time.
I'm trying to just kill a deer there. You know what I mean? At this
Yeah.
point, because on the ground, it's hard. Like it's just tough
Right.
to do it on the ground. And so for me, like anything that was a good buck that got me excited was going to get an arrow. And so I see him. He's on the opposite side of the draw from me, so he's probably about 45 yards away, and it's about a 20-mile-per-hour wind. So it's like I'm not necessarily going to take that shot. And I saw him kind of late because he was kind of coming from behind me. I just happened to look over to my right, and he was there. And I certainly couldn't hear him because of the wind. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to let him get by me to where he can't see me, but I can see him. And then I'm going to grunt and stop him and see if I can get him to come across the draw. So I did that. He stopped, and he looked, and he started walking like he wanted to come across the draw. But I was like, he's going to come across the draw and get up like to where he can actually freaking see me. And I'm not going to have a shot until he can actually see me.
Right.
So while he couldn't see me and I had plenty of wind, I actually scurried like 10 yards down into the draw behind the cedar tree. And
Mm-hmm.
I could see him moving behind it, and he was getting closer, and he stopped. And so that at that point, I was like, I'm going to snort wheeze at him, see if I can't piss him off. Snort wheezed at him, dude, and homeboy about jumped out of his skin. Like it was out of there, and it wasn't a 4 or 5 year old deer. He's probably a 3-year-old deer. You know what I mean?
Right.
130-inch 8.3-year-old deer. And I was like, that's kind of weird. I was like, man, last year, like I snort wheezed at a buck here, and they were like, what's up? You know what I mean?
Where
Like,
you at? Where you
yeah,
at,
like
son?
let's party, And so I'm like, I wonder if there's like a hammer that's like living here that's like already whooped his ass, you
Kicking
know?
everybody. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, so I'm kind of standing there looking, and like a couple minutes go by. When I say a couple, probably less than 5, and I see
Okay.
like a tail flick up in front of me. At least I thought it was a tail. And I'm looking, I'm like, are those tails up there? I can't really tell. And it's probably about 100 yards away. And
Mm-hmm.
it's ultimately where I'm trying to get to. Like I'm trying to get up to the head of this draw. And I'm looking, I'm like, I'm gonna throw some glass on it real quick. I throw some glass on it, and yeah, it's 2 does. I can see their tails. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's like there's 2 does up there. And then all of a sudden, there's like, I didn't realize it until I got up there, but there's a little undulation in the ground there. Where there's like almost like a little bowl. And when I say a little bowl, it's like a 3-foot depression in the ground. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it just drops down like 2 or 3 feet, and flattens out once it gets to the top. And I just see dude's rack break the horizon up over that like little rise. And
Oh man.
I was like, oh damn. I was like, that's a big deer. And then I lost
He's a
vision.
good.
Yeah, he's a good. And I was like, that's a Kansas buck, And then I lost visual of him, and I'm watching, trying to figure out what they're doing. And I couldn't see him for a little bit, and then all of a sudden I saw them pop over to the right. Like I just caught a glimpse of something moving again. Like it's so
Mm-hmm.
weird. Like you assume everything out there is so flat, but there's so
Right.
much like little undulations and like dips in the ground that they disappear what looks like thin air. Like I've
Right.
literally been glassing something in the middle of a CRP field, like where that deer's just walking along, and then he's just gone. And you're like,
Right.
he didn't go behind anything. Like there's nothing between him and me, and I just can't see him anymore, you know?
Hmm.
And so I lost visual on them for a couple minutes, and then I just caught movement and saw him over there. And at this point, I'm probably like 120 yards away, 125 yards away, something roughly like that. I didn't even hit it with a rangefinder to see. And I can see the does. There's a group of 3 does with him, and he's got one that he's kind of hanging out with. And so I'm like, he's trying to cut her out, is what's happening.
Right.
And like, he's not going to hear me grunt. It's too far away. You know what I mean? So I'm like, all right, one of 2 things is going to happen here. I was like, I'm either going to just watch him, and they're going to walk over the backside. And because he has her cut out, it's going to be 3 or 4 days before I'm ever going to see him again, because he's going to be tending her at that point. He's going to have better down to basically go into lockdown, you know what I mean, for the
Yeah.
next couple of days. I was like, or I can throw a Hail Mary, crack some antlers, because that's about the only thing I can do to get to be loud enough for him to hear me, and see if I can just piss him off enough to make him stick around. And then maybe I can make a move, like try to get closer, you know what I mean? Like, and keep stuff between he and I, and try to just like work my way toward him and see if I
Right.
can't break his like comfort zone of like, I'm too close now, you got to do something. And I crack the antlers together, and he just like rips his head around and looks at me, or looks in my direction. And he's just standing there all like puffed up, starts like lip curling and all kinds of like putting on a show. And
Oh
then
man.
he just turns around and walks away. And that doe now has started she's not running or anything. She's just walking the opposite direction. And after that, he just turned and walked and followed her, and they went down over the backside. And I was kind of bummed, because that was like, being not being conservative, just being pretty, I think pretty accurate, and maybe even just a little conservative. Like I was 150-inch deer all day long, like all
Right.
day. And so I assumed that from that far away was kind of like what my assumption was. And then I talked myself out of it. I was trying to convince myself he wasn't that big. And I basically did for most of the trip. Like I convinced myself that he was smaller than that. Right.
Right.
So I ended up going up to the top of the draw. I had another buck almost jump on top of me with a doe. I had them at 1.6 yards. I tucked in behind this like cedar on the ground, and then they actually went and bedded down for a couple hours in front of me.
Yeah.
For like 2 hours, bedded at 15 yards. And that day I saw 30 deer, and I want to say
my goodness.
I saw probably 1, 2, 3. I want to say I saw 2 shooters and 5 bucks.
Ah.
The one that almost jumped on top of me, like he would have been a shooter if he had his left side. Like his right side was like just this mass 8-point side. His left side was all kind of jacked up. So I don't know if he had like an injury or what, but if he had both sides, he was probably a 130-inch deer, and I would have shot him. He stood in front of me at like 25 yards for 5 minutes broadside, because
Oh wow.
the doe bedded down. And he just walked out in front of her a little bit and just stood there for like 5 minutes. And he finally then tucked into the cedars and he went and bedded right behind her.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that was kind of like, that was that day. And then the weather got kind of warm and just got kind of funky. And so then my plan after that was I did some glassing and stuff, but what I did a lot for like the next several days was just I would drive and I checked out like all the weehaw that was around me. I hunted that draw, I think, like one more time while I had a good wind on it, and then the wind was going to switch and was going to make that spot basically unhuntable for like a couple days. And then I would basically just drive to the different weehaw, and any draw that was around, I would just walk along it so far because there was tons of wind. I mean, at one point, the high wind we had was like 30 mile per hour. And so I would just walk in, get to a certain point, and I'd find some cover and I'd crack antlers and I would call and sound like a buck trying to tear stuff up, you know what I mean? And like try to get something to respond to me. I'd just walk along that whole thing and do that all the way. And then I'd walk back to the truck and drive to the next one. That was just kind of what I did for like a couple of days. And then the weather started to get right again. Like the weather hadn't got right quite yet. So it was the day that there was, I think, 30 mile per hour winds. And I had already kind of exhausted all the spots that I wanted to go to and stuff like that. And I hadn't really seen any good deer in a while. And even glass, and I wasn't seeing deer like at all, just in general. Like it was just really slow. I mean, when I say really slow, I was seeing deer most every day. Like whenever I would go out and I would sit, I would see deer. It was just a matter of like, was I seeing like a buck or a decent buck or whatever? So it was slow comparatively speaking. And so finally I was like, there was this one draw I wanted to get to. And I was like, you know what? I really want to hunt this brushy draw kind of like in between like these two food sources. And then it's kind of lined with CRP and it's all kind of like gnarly. And I was like, I really want to get into this spot. I was like, but the wind isn't right for me to get in there. And I was like, I was like, you know what? I can hunt the head of this like cedar strip that kind of lines this food source. I can hunt the head of that, and it won't bust up like the draw that I want to hunt. But I'm right on the edge of that draw, and then I'll keep the draw clean, and I can get in there whenever I get a better wind. And so that was kind of my plan. It wasn't a throwaway hunt necessarily, but it was like it's the one spot that like the wind isn't going to completely screw me that day. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was like, it's not exactly where I want to be, but you know, it could work, you know, and that was kind of where I was at. And I was like, I want to get over there anyway. So I went, and essentially how this sets up is there's like a line of cedars that kind of wraps the edge of this winter wheat field. And then, you know, on the left side of the cedars is CRP all the way up. And then as you go into that CRP field, as you continue to go left, which I want to say is like, I'm trying to think here. I think this is east or west. You get to the west of the cedars, and then it drops down into this draw, this big brushy draw. And so I wanted to be in the brushy draw, but I was like, I'll sit at the head of these cedars. And once I got up there, like there was a clear trail that was kind of running out from the side of those cedars into this field. And I was like, all right, perfect. I was like, I'll set up here. It's not ideal. I was like, but if there's a doe in this area, and I know that these does like to bed in these cedars because I've watched them walk in there and walk out of them like in the middle of the day, like to where they're bedded in there and they're just hopping out, getting a munch to eat, and then walking back in, you know? So I was like, if there's a doe in here with a buck, or a buck have a doe bedded down in here, and she decides to get up and come eat in the evening or whatever, and she's going to pull him out right along these line of these cedars and probably use this trail and come right out to the field. You know, I was like, so I'll set up here and see if this works. So I set up, you know, was trying to pick where I was gonna be, and the way this setup is like there's a 10-foot drop down, pretty sheer, into like where the cedars actually start, and so this field is kind of like up above where the cedars are at. Right. So it's almost like being in a stand, like you're about 10 feet up off the ground of where the cedars are at roughly, and it's all lined with like CRP, and it's all like grassy and stuff. And so there was a spot of dead grass I could get into that would be quiet because the grass was all dead. But I was worried about getting skylit. And so I was like, man, I'd really like to have some back cover. And there was a locust tree that was off to my right, maybe 5 yards. I was like, I could sit in front of that locust tree, have some back cover to not be skylit. And then there was some locust saplings that were right in front of me that I'd be sitting behind that would give me like front break up. You know what I mean? I was like, I'll be perfect. I was like, in that trail that there should walk out, I was like, is to my left, and is about a 30-yard shot, and I can take the shot sitting down. Like, I don't even, because it's off to my left. I was like, I can take that shot seated. I don't even need to stand or kneel,
Yeah.
And I was like, the only thing that's going to screw me is if he comes around these cedars and doesn't take that straight trail in and starts to wrap to his left as he's coming out and come toward me, because now there's going to be those saplings between he and I'm going to have to shift a little bit to the right, and I'm going to have to draw and get over top these cedar saplings to make my shot. But I was like, chances are he's not going to do that. So I'm sitting there, and it's like, I don't know what it is, like 4:00, I think, something like that. And the other thing is too, is like when I see deer in this spot, that's the one hard part about Kansas a lot of times. Like, you either see them from far away and you try to make a play on them, or a lot of times you see them, and the first time you see them, they're already right on top of you.
Right.
Like, it's kind of like that. At least that's been my experience so far. And so if I saw a deer here, he was already going to be at probably 20 yards, like the first time I even know that a deer is there. And so as I'm sitting there, I just kind of looking to my left, constantly watching like that trail, and I just see the tips of antlers kind of break the side of like the cedar trees.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw him as soon as I could see him, and I already had my bow in my hand, like, cause it was getting close to like, prime time. So my bow's already in my hand, and I'm like, buck, and he clears it. And I'm like, good buck. He's probably like roughly 140-inch 8-point. He was bigger than the other 8-point I was going to shoot. And instead of taking that trail out, he breaks left and did exactly what was like the one thing I was going to make this.
You didn't want to.
Yeah.
Right.
It was going to be the one thing that was going to make this an incredibly hard shot. And so I'm watching him, and like these cedar trees, it's like, so this row of cedars, it's not actually a row, it's actually two rows that are really close together. They're two lines of cedars. And he kind of steps in between them, and it looks like he's going to walk away from me and kind of go down the middle of the cedars. And in hindsight, he wasn't going to do that, but that's in my mind what I thought. But it also gave me the time, because he had his kind of head pointed away from me, that I could actually get away with drawing, because now he's like not looking like his eyes aren't pointing toward me anymore. It's going to be a hard quartering away shot, but it's a 20-yard shot, and I'm comfortable taking that shot. I practiced this shot, and the only thing is though, is now is I'm going to have, but because of where he's at, I'm going to have to slightly slide to my right, and I'm going to have to draw while I stand at the same time. I have to draw and stand at the same time to pull this off, because if he hears like a rock slot, like a rock crinkle or whatever at this point, like, I'm done. And so I get slid to my right. He doesn't hear me, doesn't see me, nothing. I go to stand and draw, and I stand and I get drawn. But as I'm drawing back, my arrow freaking clips a twig on one of the locust saplings, and my freaking arrow bounces up and down off my rest, and he hears it and snaps his head around. And that was it. And he was gone.
Ugh.
And I was so freaking mad at myself, because when I got into that setup, I didn't draw to make sure that I could actually make that like slide to my right and draw, like move. You know what I mean? I just assumed I had enough room, as opposed to actually sitting there drawing and making sure that I had the room. Because had I known, it's like I would have just drawn when he turned his head, and then I would have stood, and then I would have been fine, because then my arrow would have been clear of the sapling.
Right.
He bounds off. I wanted to throw my bow. Like, that's actually the closest I've ever come to throwing gear in the woods. Like, was that one. And the bummer of it was, like, the lesson learned there was that I should just trust my gut, because my gut told me to sit in that dead grass patch. And the two mistakes I made was, one, I didn't draw whenever I was behind those little locust trees to make sure I had the clearance to know that I could make a kill shot if one presented. And then the second one was to trust my instinct, because I thought I should have sat in that grass to begin with. And when I finally sat down in it, because when I looked at it, I didn't even get in it. I just looked at it. And when I finally got down in it and sat in it and got on my knees in it, there was so much grass in front of me to cover me. I didn't need back cover. I was fine.
Right.
Like, I wasn't going to get skylit. And it was actually the best shot opportunity there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just a total kick in the balls. And that was talking about you coming back from a miss and having to like get your head right. Like that.
Yeah.
That knocked me in the dirt. Like,
yeah.
Because that piece, I had an encounter with two good deer last year, one of which I was at full draw on. And that one was just a tough break where the wind just wasn't cooperating with me. I did everything right, everything I could, and it just didn't work out. This one was my fault. It wasn't, that
Right.
that the elements didn't work in my favor. It was that I screwed that up, you know.
Right.
And that's the part that burned me the most, was like, man, you don't know how many chances you're going to get like that, man. Like, hunting from the ground's hard. To get a deer within 20 yards on the ground with squat for cover's tough, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that locust tree is probably one of the only trees that you could see, right?
It was the only tree. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
only tree within 50 yards of me, for sure.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, once you got into that brushy draw, there were some trees, but when I say trees, I mean, this tree was maybe 15 feet tall max, and you can't climb into it like nothing. It's almost like a big old bush. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of what it is. So
Exactly.
that was rough, man. And that took me like a hot minute to come back from. Like, I was disgusted. Like, I haven't been that disgusted in a long time. Like, even hitting a deer in Missouri and losing it, like, I was pissed. I was upset about that, but that, again, similar to what happened to you, it's just like I couldn't see the thing, that the small twig that I clipped, and it deflected my arrow, and and shit happens. This
Right.
was, Clint, you're an idiot because you didn't do the things that you can control to have had a better setup and given yourself a better opportunity.
Right.
That's the part that makes me mad.
Yeah, and you're invested, you're far away from home and your family and all that stuff too.
Oh yeah, and I was like looking to kill, because I was like, man, this is like Tuesday, and I'm like, sweet, I'm gonna kill early. I'm gonna like be able to like sleep in, have a drink, celebrate, take this back to camp, skin it out. Like,
Yep.
it was like, maybe take a trip up to Iowa and see John, maybe run a camera with him for like a day or two. Just like, would have just been a cool trip, because then I would have gone and done some other stuff in the area, or
Yeah.
buy a Missouri tag and stop in Missouri and hunt for a couple of days, like whatever. I would have had options.
Right. And
So
Chad was in Iowa at the time too, right?
yeah, it's like I could have swung by and saw him. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
whatever. It's like it just would have been would have just been able to do other stuff on the trip.
Right.
So I licked my wounds from there. The next couple of days were just kind of slow, man. Didn't see a lot of deer. I mean, like I said, like, I saw deer every day. Just didn't see the right deer. I did eventually get into that brushy draw. I thought to be a buck down in there. I was like, this is a perfect place for a buck to cut a doe out. Walked in, set up in that spot. There's a little bench that went around it that I found, and I couldn't see all the way down in the draw, but I got there and I could hear deer down there messing around, and I could hear a buck grunt. And then that was a shooter. And snort we used at him to try to get him to party, and he just took his doe and walked away. Watched that happen. That sucked. That was a good 8-point. Different deer, one I hadn't seen before. And then
Right.
another buck came in, but it was the same buck that I had seen the second day, that had like the big right side and the messed up left side. He came in because there was a hot doe that had been in there, so he sniffed that out and he came through. I had him at like, what it was, like 15 yards.
Yeah.
And then I left that spot and I ended up hunting that spot, I think, the next day. And just in a different area of it, ended up seeing a couple deer and like a small buck. And then the last morning, I was kind of saving that draw for the last morning. Like, every time I would come out to like change positions or whatever, or to go somewhere else, or to go to a different draw or whatever, I'd always kind of spend a couple minutes and glass that area. And I was saving it till I got the right wind, and it got super cold, got the right wind on the last day. And I was like, I'm going to go back up there. Fingers crossed that big deer is off that doe now and is back out the party. You know what I mean? I was like, because I glassed for him and stuff like that too on the backside of this weehaw, and just never saw him.
Right.
And so I went up there to, got out early like normal. It's like 12 degrees, I think. And I'm walking up through this draw, and my plan was to try to get to like my setup underneath this locust tree that I had scoped out and hunted like several days prior, before I
Right.
kind of abandoned that spot for several days. And I mainly hunted that spot the one last time prior to this to kind of pick out a setup. Because I was like, all right, I've already screwed myself once on a setup. I'm going to like hunt this in the morning. Maybe I see some deer, maybe I don't, but I'm going to find the right tree to get into, like not climb, but like under, and kind of semi-brush myself in and give myself a decent setup,
Yep.
So I did that, and I'm making my way to that the last morning. And my plan was to get there like anywhere between like 40 and 45 minutes before daylight, because there's no setting up a saddle or anything because I'm just slipping into like the underneath this tree and sitting down. You know what I mean? And I'm making my way up, and this time instead of like walking along the edge of the draw, I was like, well, this is the last day I'm going to be here, so I'm actually going to walk the center of the draw so I don't get skylit by anything or nothing sees me coming
Right.
up. And the moon was bright enough. I didn't need a headlamp or anything. I was like, I'm just going to sneak up the center of this draw because if they get to this draw and they catch my ground scent because I was in here, I was never going to see them anyway because this draw is like super deep. Like these draws are pretty deep cuts.
Right.
I was like, so they can get my ground scent all they want. I don't care because I'm leaving tomorrow. And this is it. And so I did that, and I made it to where I needed to cut up out of the draw to start making my way to the tree. And I kind of came up out of the draw, and I just stopped at the edge of the draw as I crested it, got about, 5, 6, whatever, however many yards away from like the couple cedars that were along the edge of the draw. And I just kind of stopped for a second just to kind of, I didn't want to go busting into this locust grove because that's where the deer like to get, those bucks like to cut those does out to. And I just wanted to make sure there wasn't like anything in there before I just went barreling in. Right. And so I just kind of stopped for a second. I can't really see anything. I'm just kind of listening. And then all of a sudden I hear the unmistakable sound of like tines going through branches. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's already freaking deer up here. And so I just kind of stood still, didn't move. They certainly couldn't see me because I had like the dark backdrop of the draw behind me. And I had the moonlight and the skyline in front of me. And so I could see their back every so often go in front of me.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, there's 2 deer there. I was like, the one's got to be a buck. The other one's got to be a doe. So I'm just kind of standing there waiting. And then I can hear them grunt. Right. I'm like, all right. So now I can start to see just like a little bit because I kind of picked out like where their bodies were at in the skyline. And I could start to see with like a little bit of the backlight, like just, I couldn't see them. I could see their movement. This went on for like, I don't know how long. Like, I got there about 40 minutes till daylight, and it not started cracking daylight, but like, getting closer. And now I hear a grunt to my east. There's another buck that's like 40 yards away from me. I can hear him. And so now this buck that's right in front of me, I finally kind of caught a glimpse roughly of where they were at. I could see the silhouette of my tree because it was also skylit. I could see where my tree was at. I was 30 yards from my tree. Like that's where I was trying to get to. And these deer are now like right behind it. Like right behind it. And so that buck hears that other buck grunt. I think he thought I was a buck that came up through there too. And so now he's snort wheezing at us. He's all pissed off. He thinks that someone's trying to come in to, take his lady friend. I'm literally stuck out in the middle of no man's land. I don't have a stitch of cover near me. It's now, this has been going on for however long. I'm starting to get enough like of that gray light to where they're soon going to be able to see me, and I'm going to very soon be able to see like them like fully. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I'm like looking around. I'm like, I got to find something to try to get behind. I was like, or I'm just going to be completely screwed. I was like, my options are basically just watch them walk out of my life. Right. It's the last morning. Or I was like, there's not enough wind for me to get to the cedar that's like 10, 15 yards away to try to tuck into. Because at this point, like for whatever reason, there was a 20, 30 mile per hour wind every day for like the past 5 days. That morning, there wasn't even like a breeze, like nothing. Like, and so
never fails.
Yeah. And I'm like, I just need some cover sound. I need like a 10 mile an hour, 15 mile an hour gust of wind to come for like 20 seconds just to give me enough time to get to that tree. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's all I need. He just wasn't going to get it. And so dude's all pissed off. He thinks there's a bucks in the area trying to steal his doe. So I was like, there's literally like a Charlie Brown looking Christmas tree to my left. I'm like, that's the closest thing to me. I was like, he thinks I'm a deer. I think he thinks I'm a deer. I'm like, what if I just grunt, sound like a deer, and don't just step over? What if I just shuffle my feet to try to sound like a pissed off deer? You know what I mean? And just try to make my way to that Charlie Brown Christmas tree and kneel down behind it. So I was like, that's about all I got. You know what I mean? I don't have any other options. It's either that or stand here until, he gets
until
enough
you're
gray
just
light.
sticking out.
Yeah, until he gets enough gray light that he can see me. So I grunt, shuffle my feet. I get over there. I'm able to get down, finally get an arrow knocked in my release on. And And it worked. Like they didn't move. Like he's still there. So now I'm like, and when I grunted, like he postured up, looked like he got a little pissed off. Cause now at this point I can kind of see where he's at. Like there's enough gray light and there's enough moonlight, or not moonlight, but skylit that I can see him,
Right.
So I'm now stuck behind this tree for however long. So it's now getting on close to, this has been going on for 25, getting close to 30 minutes probably. You know what I mean? Like since I got there and recognized that they were there until like I finally could make a move, and it's getting light enough out now to where I can actually see, and I actually spotted them. Like the first time could see them, and they were 10 yards behind my tree. Like 10 yards from where I was trying to get to. And I saw him in his full glory, and it was that big deer I had seen on Sunday. And I was trying to convince myself that he was smaller, and he was all of 150 inches, if not better. Like he was a big deer. And so at this point, I'm like, he's going to be able to, this shit isn't going to last. I was like, I have nothing for cover behind this Charlie Brown Christmas tree. I was like, so, and where he's at, like behind that tree, the reason I picked that tree is because they typically want to cut right in front of that tree, what I've watched, or they want to cut right behind it where he was at. But when they get behind it, also turns into like my nemesis, which is a bunch of small locust saplings. And that in this light, it's like I can see well enough to shoot at this point, but I can't see well enough to like pick out where there's like small branches and stuff.
Right. And those small branches are the thing that like you just can't see them, man. They're just too small to see.
Yeah. Yeah. They're hard to see just in general and like good light. And I'm like dealing with that like first morning gray light where it's like it's just shootable light. And so I'm like, I need to get him to like 15, 20 yards max, to take a shot,
Yep.
And at this point now he's probably at like 30, but he's fully behind the tree that I wanted to get to. So he's mainly covered up. I mean, I can see his rack, I can see him, but like there's, he's completely covered up.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, my only choice is I know he's pissy. I know he's aggressive. He's already snort wheezed at us. I was like, so I'm just going to throw down a snort wheeze, get aggressive, maybe kick this little tree on behind a little bit, like to make some like aggressive noise and see if I can't piss him off enough to walk toward me. And so not only did he need to walk toward me and close like a good 10 yards, but he had to close more than that because he had to walk around the tree and then toward me.
Right.
And so I do that. I snort wheeze at him. I kick that tree a couple times to make some noise. And all of a sudden, dude, he just like peckers up, puffs up, and starts stiff-legged walking toward me. I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me. This is going to work. I'm like, this is actually going to go down. And he got to, I don't know, probably 25 yards and was head on to me. And there was just no shot. And I knew from being in the earlier couple of days before there were a bunch of saplings right where he is standing.
Right.
And I still can't see them really. And it was just not a shot that I could take. And after that, his doe got a little spooky because I'm sure she felt like there were two bucks that were around. One grunted at him and I snort wheezed at him. So she bounded away like 3 bounds. He snapped his head around, looked at her, looked back in my direction, and then just walked toward her. And then I grunted a couple times to try to change his mind, and that was it. And he walked away. Yeah. And I saw a couple deer that night, no shooters. I think I saw 1 or 2 bucks that evening later. And then as a consolation prize, I was leaving, and on the back side of that piece of weehaw, there's that CRP, but there's also that grain field, and there's a cut bean field that like actually is along the road that is adjacent to the private. And as a consolation prize, I got to see that 150-inch Magnum run right beside my truck at about 20 yards chasing that doe. So I got a full, like, my last parting gift was like I got a full view of him in plenty enough moonlight that I could see 100% of what he was and how big he was. Wow. And that was the extra kick in the ding ding that you always like to have at the end of those hunts.
right to the moneymaker.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, here's what could have been, man. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But, I don't know, man. I love Kansas.
Overall, man, what a cool experience, though.
Yeah, dude, it was a cool experience. I still left fulfilled, did a little contemplating while I was driving home and just tried to remind myself that sometimes we don't get what we want, but we get what we need.
Right.
And maybe that's what I needed. Maybe I needed that experience. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I wasn't ready yet. I had my opportunity and I I wasn't ready to fulfill it.
Yep.
And so I don't leave with any regrets. I did everything I could do. I stayed after it, and plan is if I can draw the tag again next year, I'm going to go back next year, and do it again because I just love hunting from the ground, man. It is hard.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's brutal, but it's fast becoming like my favorite way to hunt.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
Yeah.
So. And you, on the positive note, when you got home, you realized you can hunt the next 2 Sundays in a row. So
exactly, which I'm totally taking advantage of. I can't go out this Saturday because we actually have a belt and stripe promotions at the gym for jiu-jitsu.
Nice.
So I don't know that I'm getting one or anything like that, but it's just kind of more of like a camaraderie thing. Like everybody goes in, it's an hour-long session.
Sure.
Some of the, I think some other guys from the other gym, like Tim, the guy, our coach, he owns this gym plus another one. It's like 20 minutes away. And so I think some guys from that gym come in as well for promotion. And I think some of his like upper level, like other black belt guys and brown belt guys and come in and basically kick all the asses of like all of us like newer newbies for an hour.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's almost like if you've played football and you've done like bull in the ring, that's kind of what happens. At least that's what it was explained to me because I've never done this at this place. But some of the guys have been around for a little while said like basically like some of the guys come in from his other gym. And they kind of get in the center, and there's a group in the center. And what I understood, I may have misunderstood, but it's all like the high level guys, like the black belts, the brown belts, the purple belts,
right.
Kind of get in the center, and all of us like, lower level guys, all stand around the edge of it, and they just point to you and say, "You come here," and basically a different guy just picks you out and kicks your ass for the next hour. In a nice way. They're not trying to hurt you, but it's more of like a rite of passage. Like it's an hour of like nonstop 3 to 4 minute, 3 to 4 minutes period. So you just roll with one guy for 3 minutes. You stop another guy. The one dude was like, they're just going to look at you. He's like, if they make eye contact with you, you're theirs. So you just walk over. He was like, and
and that's cool because you're just learning from somebody that's got all that experience.
I mean, it's a privilege to roll with guys that at least I look at it that way. Like I was rolling with a guy last night that's a brown belt. He's way bigger than me. He goes probably like 260. He's a giant of a human.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a privilege for me to roll with him because every time we do, he can smash me anytime he wants to, but he works with me and works me through positions and gives me different looks that I need to see, to use certain techniques and stuff like that. And so anytime I can get on the mat with those guys that are that much better than me and take an ass beating, I don't look at it as a bad thing. I look at it as a privilege to be able to do because they're willing to spend time with me because that's how you learn. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing high level stuff in person, being done to you, and that's the best way to understand it.
Yeah, well, we all know you're just trying to kick Chad's ass. So
that's happening, dude. Like I'm telling you, we've already that gauntlet has already been thrown down. I was like, next time we're in person, dude, I'm gonna choke you out.
Goodbye.
He's like, we'll get it on, man. He's like, we'll do this. He's like, he ain't scared. You
gotta make sure somebody else is there though, so it's witnessed.
Well, him too, man. He's so headstrong. Like I'll have to like put him to sleep for him to stop. You know that?
Oh yeah.
Like he ain't gonna. Like if I get a choke on him, he ain't gonna just tap. Like I'm gonna have to sleep him. He
told me how he got all those scars on his face.
Yeah, bulls
kicking him in the face,
stepping him on the face and shit. Yeah, exactly. Cool, buddy. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you jumping on here. I always love talking to you. We need to have a face-to-face soon.
Yep.
Happy holidays to everyone out there listening because this is going to come out right before Thanksgiving. So if you're listening to this right before the holiday, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you have a happy one, a safe one. Kick back a cocktail. Good luck during the gun season opener here in Pennsylvania.
Yep, absolutely.
And Hepler, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, buddy. I look forward to seeing you soon.
You too, homie. Take it easy.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. If you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Spartan Forge, Exodus, and Skull Brew Coffee Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.